Okay, hello everyone. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone joining us here today. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the latest TAFISA webinar on monitoring and evaluation and impact in sport for all, how it can help you. If you hear us say monitoring and evaluation or M&E or MERL, M-E-R-L, it's all referring to the same monitoring and evaluation research and learning field, which goes by many different names. One moment. So my name is Rachel Mate. I am Project Impact Manager here at TAFISA, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I am very positive that you'll enjoy today's program. It's been carefully curated with a diverse set of speakers and panelists to give you different perspectives on the topic of M&E. This is the second webinar in our series. It's been crafted as a follow-up to the previous webinar on capacity building in Sport for All. When we undertake capacity building, one of the most important things we can do is to evaluate and understand how the event went and be able to measure and report on the impact of the event. With this in mind, I'm excited to introduce you to our speakers, case studies, and panelists. Before we go any further, I want to advise you that this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on our TAFISA YouTube page and the TAFISA website. Your microphones have been muted by default to ensure a smooth running of the webinar, and we ask that you drop any messages, comments, and questions using the chat and the Q&A function in Zoom. We welcome everyone to share their name, organization, and country in the Zoom chat so that we know who's joining us today and from where. So those are our housekeeping items, and it's time to officially kick off the webinar. It's my pleasure to introduce Kwok Ng. He is a researcher with positions at University of Limerick, Lithuanian Sports University, and University of Turku. He also has a background working in sport for development at the grassroots level. Kwok, the floor is yours.
Thank you there. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you, TAFISA, for hosting this and inviting me to give a few minutes to talk about monitoring and evaluation for Sport for All. It's a great honor to stand before you to discuss a topic that is of paramount importance to the world of sports. The role of monitoring and evaluation in Sport for All movement is really, really important nowadays. As a global community that makes sports accessible for everyone, regardless of the age, ability, or background, we need to recognize more of the work that we do, from just participation to much more than this. And that includes the understanding and improving and maximizing the impact it has, our initiatives have on people. And this is where monitoring and evaluation come to play. So I'd like to start to talk to you about a little story that I've experienced over 20 years ago. I was working in Community Sports Development Office in the city of Cambridge, and it's a place where you have some of the world's best academics, but also at the same time, it also offered a very large social inequalities in the north part of the city. And long story short is that in the olden days, people used to think that the city of Cambridge was an attractive place to be, and amongst all the academics. And so what happened was that with the large inequalities, some of the deprivation levels were so high that there needed to be a lot of support to try to encourage physical activity and sport. So through a program called the Active England Funding, we secured about £4 million to build an infrastructure and community sports environment. We engaged with social services, schools, community leaders, and we got some of the state-of-the-art, as well as some of the most basic infrastructure to provide some physical activity opportunities. We went to the communities, we heard their barriers, and found solutions to encourage people to go out and to do sport and to be physically active. We felt proud of our successes when the project ended, but at the end of the project, we were asked by our funders, were we a success? So deep down inside, I would say, yes, we were a success, but we needed to demonstrate that. We needed to show that. And so this is where I turn my focus on the talk of why we should carry out monitoring and evaluation in sport for all. So in the next few minutes, I'll talk a bit about why should it matter. So for example, monitoring and evaluation is useful for measuring its impact and assessing performance, as just mentioned. It can also be used to inform decision-making of what has been done, what is going on, and what can be done next. The data from monitoring can be used for accountability and is transparent to all the stakeholders in that regard that we can just demonstrate we did this, but we can also show that you can also see that we did this. And it's not just a case of me putting my numbers together to pretend that I did this or we did this, but actually it's really a fact. So if monitoring and evaluation is carried out well, it can help ensure sustainability of sport and activities. This can be done through the vision of short and long-term goals and benchmarking progress against them. And I mentioned for it to be carried out well. And this is also an area where one should really think about how to do monitoring and evaluation. The evaluation of sport for all programs are needed to ensure that there's inclusion and equity for the sport programs. Need to provide evidence about participation of what is needed and when to state the basics for fighting inequalities in sport and physical activity. We need to demonstrate this through the numbers and through evaluation processes. To do that, we also need communication with stakeholders in what they wanted in the past, what they're doing now, and what they want to do in the future. Reports that come from monitoring and evaluation can be used to assess a change in time, as well as highlight key stakeholder involvement. We can see whether there's progress or whether there's stagnation. We can also see what a stakeholder has been doing and maybe demonstrate specific programs or initiatives that have occurred and demonstrate the benefits from such activities. And this is through the evaluation side. In my opinion, the sports sector is still a rather young sector. It is infused with transport, tourism, and security. And these are the areas where governments pay a lot of attention, put a lot of funding in, and seldom do, depending on where you are around the world, seldom is it ever put into sport. We see this in terms of the health literature. We see that in the well-being literature, sport and physical activity don't appear. We see the world reports on the health from the WHO. There is no information about sports on a comparable level that we see with tobacco, with safety, with education, with hygiene. Similarly, with UNESCO, we see a large report which includes of the children that are not counted under the Sustainable Development Goals and under the agenda of Leave No One Behind. And again, in this well-being report, most of us will believe that sport has a part to play in well-being. There are pictures of people doing sport, but there's no evidence, there's no numbers, there's no figures of sport and physical activity in such a report. This is what I'm saying, that we are a rather young sector, and it should be something that we should learn from. We should value the importance of monitoring and evaluation, and it is a way for sport for all to learn, to be receptive to learn, and to action on the learnings. Finally, monitoring and evaluation can be used as a way to celebrate successes in sport for all. It can be provided as an important aspect of volunteer management, which is the recognition of the success that had happened. Recognition is key to retention, and this is what's needed to feed the success of sport, especially when run by volunteers. Fair as these points may be, as I mentioned, the common barrier experienced by knowing knowing how to carry out monitoring and evaluation. I consider myself quite fortunate in the sense that I work in a university environment, or well, multiple university environments. Here I have access to a team of researchers, research assistants, access to literature to find out the best way to monitor for a specific person, for a specific purpose, like for a research question. I have access to computer programs to collect data, to visualize results. I also have the sense of trust with the participants that comes with impartiality, and I'm not going to be biased as I inform on the results. As a result, I've worked with data from over 50 countries from around the world to monitor and evaluate participation in physical activity in sport. It's been really insightful to see all those issues come to light from grassroots activities all the way through to policy actions. As such, I'm a really strong advocate for monitoring and evaluation. So if you're wondering how to do this, I have a few suggestions. 1, attend training and build capacity, just like this. And try to get an understanding of how your organization can collect data, monitor, and evaluate. Within your organization, establish a group who can focus on monitoring and evaluation. This group can carry out exercises like goal setting, creating a logic map where you can put links between the actions, engage with stakeholders, make decisions and adaptive processes in light of the results, ensure there is transparency in all processes, and foster a learning culture. And this would then drive a system of willingness to change, because without this willingness to change, we're left with the numbers. Also, to develop data collection tools, seek out instruments that are relevant to you and consider what is important for you in relation to others. For example, are you seeking alignment with research findings? So should you be using research-led instruments? Are you seeking commercial partnerships? Should you be highlighting the benefits for the commercial partners? Are you tailoring to the effect of certain aspects of programs? So you want to highlight certain areas and certain aspects, certain population groups. These all require discussions and consideration before choosing the method that you use for collecting data. It is what we spend a lot of our time in research to do this, because what we are seeking is the truth towards a research question, an answer to a research question. It's also important to note, like first-time cyclists, that you don't want to go out on a bike on a busy road straight away. You want to make sure that you test out your balance, you test out your confidence in being able to cycle in a safe environment. The same also applies for monitoring and evaluation. You want to test out the monitoring processes from the data collection side of things, the interviewing, the analysis, and the reporting in a small and safe environment first before doing it on a large scale. Finally, 2 more points. One is to set out periods of monitoring. Monitoring is not just done on a one ad hoc time. It should be done on a regular basis, and you should find out how regular that should be for you to suit for you and your organization. And then also there is the need to organize a mechanism where your organization has time to reflect, to look at the evaluation and nurture from that. Be honest with yourselves to take the feedback, whatever the monitoring and evaluation has said, and that will help you to learn and to grow going forwards. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really enjoyed what you said about the challenges with the youth of the sports sector. I mean, I think anyone working on the ground, we just know that our programs are so beneficial, but without all of the evidence base, it's very difficult to take it to different places. And thank you for the thought processes and the practical examples you gave. I think today, we're really hoping to leave all of our audience members with some more practical examples and how you create the next step for you in this monitoring and evaluation journey. So thank you very much. If anybody has any questions for Kwok, please post in the Q&A. He's welcome to answer them. Before we get down to the case studies, we have a quick activity for our audience members. A webinar on monitoring and evaluation would not be complete without some data collection. So we want to get a sense of where your organizations are at the moment and the areas that you can see monitoring and evaluation help your organization. And we're going to use this information to help guide some of our future discussions here in this webinar, as well as understand you, the audience, more for us as TEFISA. We'll be using Mentimeter. A QR code has been added into the chat, and we'll be starting a presentation on the screen now where you can scan the QR code using your cell phone, and we're just going to have you vote on 2 items. So voting is very easy to do using your phone, and you can also access it via the browser. So the link will come up, and so we'll give you a few moments to join now. While you're joining and while we're getting everything set up, I'll let you know that we have limited the responses to just 3 votes per question. So just pick the 3 top answers for your organization. And if you're not part of the M&E plan within your, exactly involved in the monitoring and evaluation, you can just answer based on the context of your role in the organization and the programs that you're working with. So let's just give a few, maybe another 10 seconds. Looks like we got, you can see everyone joining. That looks great. So we'll still have the QR code on the next page, but I think let's go ahead and open the voting for the first question. So I'll describe these a little bit. So we're looking to understand the 3 areas your organization currently uses monitoring and evaluation to assess. So this would be what you know that you're looking at. And so it is strategic planning and efficiency. So this is using data to inform strategic planning and ensuring alignment of your activities with your goals and objectives. Impact assessment, so the impact of your activities on broad ranges of metrics. Funding and fundraising, so the value of your work to make your organization more attractive and valuable to funders. Storytelling and advocacy, so this would be providing qualitative data that goes beyond numbers. So showcasing impact and quality through narratives or more storytelling. Transparency and accountability, so tracking and reporting activities. And then learning and improvement, so understanding how your activities will help you make better decisions next time. So, all right, we'll give just another minute. You can give the main one. Very good. So yeah, it looks like the major one, actually major 2, are impact assessment and learning and improvement. So that's obviously good to hear. I mean, that's the main part of monitoring and evaluation, research and learning. But we definitely see some representation from what your organizations are currently using. Okay, I think we can move to the next question to talk about what you would like your organization to be able to assess. So you can just choose one option there. And so this would be kind of in your, ideally, you would be able to assess. And it's the same exact options as before. Just wait another few moments for some answers. Great, thank you everyone for the vote. So that's okay. So yeah, it was interesting to see that the main things you're doing are the monitoring and evaluation and research and learning, but that when we go to what you would like to do, it kind of expands a bit more into the different categories. They were showing higher impact. So we'll be sharing all of these results after the webinar, and we'll certainly take them into account when we're sharing future resources about how we can help people. I mean, I'm sure a lot of these skills and results will be mentioned in our case studies and in our panel discussion that we'll get to later. So moving forward with our program, we're going to start with 2 case studies, one focused more on quantitative data and one on qualitative data. So we're going to be hearing from Pro Sport Development in India and Hurrah in Brazil. Both of these organizations are leaders in the sport for all fields in their area, and I'm excited to provide the platform for them to share their learnings in this space. So we're going to start with the quantitative side from Eduardo Pacheco. He is the founder and president of Hurrah in Brazil. It's a nonprofit organization that has already impacted more than 65,000 children and young people in just the last 15 years. So we're going to start his presentation and welcome Eduardo.
Hello, everyone. A big thanks to Tafisa for this opportunity to share our story. I'm here today to tell you how quantitative data has helped us reshape and refine our programs and establish our organization's impact. URA is a nonprofit organization founded in 2009 with the mission of promoting integral human development and to bring civic values through educational sport. With our projects, we have already trained more than 800 physical education teachers in public schools and have impacted the lives of more than 65,000 children in low-income neighborhoods. The children involved in our projects are boys and girls from 4 to 18 years old who live in vulnerable social conditions. We do not have our own facility. We work at public schools and at partners' facilities. So we train and coach PE teachers who become our project multipliers. And we organize events to attract families and communities to join their children. We introduce and develop sports such as rugby and golf in schools and with community partners. Working with PE teachers and elementary and high school students, we have developed a unique methodology that combines sports practice and the practice of values that will enable a more critical and just society. Our methodology is based on the belief that educational sport directly contributes to children and youth development under the 4 pillars of integral education as proposed by UNESCO. Nowadays, we are running 6 different projects for 3,000 children in 30 schools in 3 different cities. Next slide, please. Okay. Before being sponsored by Laureus, 95% of our revenues come from public funds or similar. That means we had our projects solely evaluated by quantitative metrics and focused on either process or results, or both, but never impact. That is because as long as we submitted our reports with those metrics and some sort of explanation about the quantitative effects, we were okay. No one in the government or area responsible to accompany policy-funded projects has ever helped us to improve this part of the equation. During the pandemics, all public funding was diverted to the more pressing issues, and we had to resort to private donations. And companies have a different way to evaluate the return of the money they invest. They started asking us about impact. That forced us to research and learn with other organizations how to design projects with the tools to measure and evaluate our work, not only on results, but also on impact. We had to bring the best social technologies to the forefront. This is why we are so grateful to Laureus sponsorship, and we'd like to share our experience with you. Next slide, please. As you see in this table, our results were measured by these three simple lines. This happened in the early years of UHA. Although we had a board of directors and review our actions annually, we did not need a detailed way to measure results or to measure impacts. We know that even though we were only collecting outcome data, we are impacting the community. However, this was not measured by us. When the need for private resources arose, and to obtain them, it was necessary to show in more details how our impact happened, we looked for distinct models in organizations similar to ours. We activate our network to learn what these companies were asking, so we could focus our attention on what needed to be done in a systematic way. We visit several organizations, we hired consultants, and we were trained by experts to help us with this matter. It took time, and we did this work involving the entire team and also our local partners. The focus was to prepare ourselves for a cultural change, because in some cases, that's what we are talking about. All it takes is a change in behavior. Next slide, please. The UHA projects take place in a highly socially vulnerable neighborhood and serves many children. But how to put an impact on numbers? That development flow from introducing impact data in measurement tools involved a structured process that began with defining our theory of change, TOC, and ended with integrating lessons learned into the future planning. By systematically collecting and analyzing quantitative data, we can effectively measure the impact of our programs, make informed decisions, and drive continuous improvement. This approach ensures our programs align with our goals and make a meaningful difference. It takes time, it requires discipline and organization, and needs to be reviewed consistently, but it works. Integrate the impacting data into measurement tools requires a structured approach and aligns with our TOC and monitoring, evaluation, and learning frameworks. This process ensures that the data collected effectively reflects the outcomes and impacts of our programs, facilitating continuous improvement and strategic decision-making. Both tools were brought to us by lawyers and by the other organizations that we visit. The use of indicators in our projects, you can move to the next slide, please. So we move from the 3 lines table to all these tables and sheets. To use of the indicators in our projects were fundamental for several reasons. Transparency and accountability. Most of nonprofit organizations depends on the donations, public and private financing, and partnerships. Result indicators provide concrete data that demonstrates how resources were used and what resources and what results were achieved, which is essential to maintain the trust of donors and partners. Decision-making. With clear indicators, the organization can identify what is working well and what needs to be adjusted. This facilitates evidence-based decision-making, optimizing research, and increasing project efficiency. It's good for planning and continuous improvement. Analysis of indicators over time allows you to identify trends, predict challenges and opportunities, and plan future actions based on historical data. This promotes a culture of continuous improvement within the organization. For fundraising, well-defined and positive results as indicators are a powerful tool for funding raising. They help demonstrate the effectiveness of projects to potential funders, increasing the chances of them obtaining new support and partnerships. That's the part that I like most is the team motivation engagement. When staff see concrete results from their work, it can increase motivation and engagement, promoting a more productive and results-oriented work environment. Alignment with the mission and values. Indicators help ensure to the organization's activities are aligned with its missions and values. This is crucial to maintaining the organization's integrity and focus on its core objectives. In short, result indicators are essential tools to guarantee the effectiveness, transparency, and sustainability of our projects in social work. So promoting a positive and lasting social impact. Using monitoring, evaluation, and learning frameworks enhances the entire process of measuring project results, as it details all project actions in minutiae and gives us all execution steps, like general objectives, specific objectives, goals, activities, qualitative indicators, quantitative indicators, means of checking results, verified our audience, expected results, and the result achieved. It is worth mentioning that we started using this format, MEL, the MEL framework, in 2020. And since then, we have increased our research by 15%. We have seen greater engagement from our team in each project, and we have had lower staff turnover. From a management point of view, we were successful in implementing performance indicators. I can say that UHA, the implementation of quantitative data, helped us to remodel and refine our programs and has altered the way UHA runs initiatives and programs. So the next slide, I can show you these are all our sponsors, and most of them came after do all this work. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. And thank you for your transparency in kind of talking about how before when you didn't have any of these measures in place, it was only after you had the government funding paused, and then in order to kind of pivot, you had to implement these, but that they've actually benefited you, probably more than you ever thought. So that's a really interesting case study of implementing these. And I think it also is a great way to see that it's not just one organization deciding that they should do it, but that there's a lot of other players and stakeholders in the field that we can all work together to help each other to all rise up. And yeah, thank you very much. That was a great presentation. Okay, so next we're going to hear from the other side of the coin. So Eduardo presented a lot of the quantitative data, and then we want to hear a little bit more about the importance and the background of collecting qualitative data. So our second case study is presented by Rohan Pereira from Pro Sport Development. Pro Sport Development is a nonprofit dedicated to the holistic development of young people through sport, physical activity, and play. Rohan is a team lead for projects and partnerships and oversees the on-ground sport programs, monitoring and evaluation, external research engagements, capacity building workshops, and development initiatives. So thank you for being here today, Rohan. The floor is yours, and we'll be sharing your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Rachel, for that lovely introduction, and thank you to Tafisa for providing me with this platform to share about PSD's work, and I hope those joining in. And I was just skimming through the chat, the people from all over the world, so I just hope the learnings that we share can benefit your organization in some way or the other.
Yeah, just give us one more moment to share.
Sure. Yes, thank you. So we can start with the first slide. Yes, so just a brief introduction to PSD. As Rachel mentioned, we are a social enterprise based in New Delhi, India. We were founded in 2013, and our focus is on working towards the holistic development of young people through sport, physical activity, and play. Um, so as you can see, our mission is quite extensive. We are working towards ecosystem development, ecosystem building, basically changing the narrative on how sport is approached, how sport is viewed, and ensuring that sports is accessible to all. We're trying to build the narrative around how sport has the potential to empower anybody who participates in it. And how we do this is we work through three different avenues. Uh, we work directly with young people implementing our own sport for development programs. These are mixed gender programs targeted at young people from underserved communities, primarily aged between 5 to 16. Our flagship program is the community sports program, which has been running in Bhubaneswar, which is a city in an eastern state of Odisha in India. The focus of the program is larger life skill development, leadership development, awareness on child rights, adolescent health and hygiene. I'm pretty sure a lot of organizations in today's session must be working on similar areas. So that is what we do in terms of our work with young people. We also work with facilitators, physical educators, coaches through providing capacity building workshops and trainings on how to leverage sport-based approaches in your own work. So basically how to effectively implement sport-based programs. And finally, we also work with organizations in the capacity of providing technical support in areas related to sport for development. So these are mostly research programs, curriculum development engagements, knowledge resource developments. So overall, three different areas of work, all within the goal of just promoting the access to sport for all and shifting the narrative on how sport is viewed. So today's presentation, we're just going to talk about how PSD approaches M&E and how we've integrated qualitative aspects of evaluation in each of our different areas of work. Can you go to the next slide, please? So yes, a quick insight into PSD's approach to M&E. So as you saw, and as I mentioned, that PSD works across different dimensions, different areas of work. So M&E is something that is present across all areas of work. It's not just focused on on-ground programming, not just in our work with young people and where we're evaluating the changes, but we also ingrained it and made it a part of our system where it's also involved in our work with facilitators and work with organizations. We do have a team member who's involved in M&E. The person is in charge mostly of preparing data collection tools, analyzing data, preparing the reports. But overall, every team member at PSD, from the coaches who are delivering programs on ground to those who are managing programs sitting offsite, everyone's involved in certain aspects of monitoring and evaluation. Our approach to M&E is continuous, so we do not restrict it to just at the start or the end of the program. We make sure that we're continuously monitoring, we're continuously taking feedback, reflecting on our work, capturing observations, so that we can improve not just our own work, but also communicate what we're doing to the stakeholders who are supporting our programs. And finally, our insights that we generate are data-driven and narrative-backed. I'll provide some more insight into this. What we mean is we provide a strong balance on quantitative data as well as qualitative narratives, because we know that numbers are important. Numbers showcase and tell a part of the story, but it's very important to include personal, community, and organization narratives to just reveal true impact. Next slide, please. So yes, so as I mentioned, I'll just be going through a few examples. For starters, I'll just go into our M&E when we work with young people. So this is what most organizations must be doing. We have a strong MEL framework with key indicators outlined for different areas of outputs and outcomes that we're wishing to achieve through our programming. In terms of output data, we have a strong MIS system that we've developed in-house. And in terms of outcome assessment, we leverage a mixed methods approach where we capture qualitative as well as quantitative data. A few approaches, as mentioned in the presentation: surveys, focus group discussion, physical assessments. But an important aspect of our data collection and impact sharing and assessment process is case studies and narratives. So we have a strong system in place where our coaches are continuously on the ground identifying young people of whom case studies can be prepared. Now, these case studies are their stories, are their narratives about how they've been impacted by the program. But these case studies are not just their stories. We get insights from their teachers, their parents, their community members, their friends, just to give a holistic picture as to how a certain young person has been impacted by a program. These case studies are often written documents. They're also videos, which we'll be showcasing in our presentation as I go forward. Next slide, please. For starters, just as an example of a written document, as I mentioned, our flagship community sports program, we recently released our annual impact report. So as you can see, an area of outcome is improved interaction and relations among peers of different genders. To provide some context, we work in Bhubaneswar, as I mentioned, with young people in underserved communities. So we work in schools where there are not the actual provisions provided where young people from different genders can interact in a safe and secure and a positive way. So PSD, through our programming, which is our focus of making sure it's mixed gender, we promote these interactions in a healthy way. So as you can see, the number, the evaluation data says that 61% of adolescent participants express comfort in interacting with peers of different genders. So what it shows is that 61% in the end of our data collection processes outline that they're very comfortable interacting with others. But some person might be very comfortable, some person might be less. Some person might have moved from not being comfortable at all. Some person might have moved for being somewhat comfortable. So that's where we include storytelling and narratives. As you can see, it might not be clear in this presentation, but you can access the report online on our website and on our social media. We have quotes supporting this finding. So these quotes are from female participants, male participants, teachers, as well as parents. And overall, their feedback. So for example, the girl participant is saying, earlier they used to be scared of boys. They used to feel that the boys would make fun of them. But now, ever since they play together, talk to each other, they feel much more comfortable interacting. The boy is saying that earlier we used to play separately. Girls used to play separate, we used to play separate, and we never knew that we could play together. So playing together in our program has made them learn that. Similarly, a parent is saying that my son used to never talk to girls earlier. He was very shy, but now he is very comfortable interacting. In earlier iterations of our report, there was a parent saying, earlier my child used to see work and job professions being very gendered. But ever since they participate in the program, they don't think that a certain chore or a certain job is supposed to be done by a certain gender. So these are findings that we only get through speaking to people, getting their own narratives. And finally, a teacher who shared that earlier girls and boys used to always sit separately, but now as they're getting that opportunity to positively interact, we see them working together in the same group. So it just goes to show that we all know that a lot of good work is being done out there. Sometimes the number might show the good work, but once you dig deeper, especially working in different contexts, the narratives come into play and we can show true impact. I'll show another example along with a video in the next slide. Can we just go to the next slide, please? So as I mentioned, PSD is one of the areas of focus is we build awareness on adolescent health and hygiene, particularly menstruation. Another important contextual element here is that the schools that we work in, they don't have the appropriate resources or the capacity to build that awareness in the young people. So often, even if they do, it's usually girls have separate classes from a certain rigid textbook. Boys have either no classes or in the class, they'll be having a separate class where they might not get the proper education. So what PSD does is we've integrated that learning through play-based approaches. So once again, the statistic says that 88% of adults in self-reported awareness. Okay, that's a good figure, but some people might question, okay, how do you know that PSD is attributed to teaching that particular aspect? How do you know that they didn't know before that? And that's where storytelling narratives come into play. If you had a chance to read through the quotes, the children talk about how when the sharing was happening, they saw boys laughing at girls and girls feeling uncomfortable. But as slowly they began to go through more sessions together, they started feeling a certain level of support being required by their end. So it just goes in to show how numbers do give a certain image, but definitely digging deeper, getting the real change and highlighting it is only what storytelling can do. I request you to kindly just play the video. This is a video of one of our participants who just shares the importance of the program in helping her learn about menstrual education.
नमस्कार मो ना प्रीति मैसाऊ 9th क्लास रे पढ़े सरस्वती शिशु विद्या मंदिर सिजुआ स्कूल तो मुझे टीनेज रे आमर कौन सब चेंजेस हुए से विषय रे कहबा को चाहूँगी ତ ପୂର୍ବରୁ ଯେମିତି ଟିନେଜ୍ ଉପରେ ଆମର କିଛି ଅଧିକ ଧାରଣା ନଥିଲା, କିନ୍ତୁ ଘରୁ ବାହାରୁ ପରିବାରରୁ ଆମକୁ ଯାହା ଜଣାଥିଲା ତାହା ଅଧ ମିଛ ଥିଲା, ଯାହାକି ଠିକ୍ ନଥିଲା। ଏହା ଏକ କୁପ୍ରଥା ଥିଲା, ଯାହାକି ଭୁଲ ଥିଲା। ତ ଆମେ PhD କ୍ଲାସ୍ ଆଟେଣ୍ଡ କଲୁ। ଆଟେଣ୍ଡ କଲା ପରେ ଏଇ ଟିନେଜ୍ର ଚେଞ୍ଜେସ୍ ବିଷୟରେ ଆମେ ଯଦି ଜାଣିବାକୁ ପାଇଲୁ କି ଏହା କୌଣସି ଖରାପ ଜିନିଷ ନୁହେଁ, ଏହା ବଡ଼ିର ଗୋଟେ ପାର୍ଟ ହେଇଥାଏ। ଯେମିତିକି ମୁଁ ଝିଅ, ଯେମିତି ଏଇ ଅବସ୍ଥାରେ ଟିନେଜ୍ରେ ଆମର ହୁଏ ପିରିୟଡ଼୍ସ ହୁଏ। ଏହି ସମୟରେ ଆମକୁ ଘରେ ବହୁତ ଜିନିଷ ବାରଣ କରିଥାନ୍ତି, ଯେମିତିକି ପାଣିକୁ ଛୁଅ ନାହିଁ, କି ଏମିତି କରିପାରିବନି, ସେମିତି କରିପାରିବନି, କି ତାପରେ PhD କ୍ଲାସ୍ କଲା ପରେ ଆମେ ଜାଣିବାକୁ ପାଇଲୁ ଯେ ଏହା ଭୁଲ। ଏସବୁ କିଛି ଜିନିଷ ନଥାଏ, ଯାହାକି ଏଇ ଟିନେଜ୍ ବୟସରେ ଏଇଟା ଗୋଟେ ଶରୀରର ପାର୍ଟ, ଏଇଟା ଗୋଟେ ଶରୀରର ପ୍ରୋସେସ୍, ଯାହାଦ୍ୱାରା କି ଏଇଟା ଠିକ୍ ସମୟରେ ହେବା ଦ୍ୱାରା ଆମ ଶରୀରର କୌଣସି ପ୍ରୋବ୍ଲେମ୍ ହୋଇନଥାଏ, କି ଆମର କୌଣସି ପ୍ରୋବ୍ଲେମ୍ ହୋଇନଥାଏ। ତ ଆମେ ଏହି ବିଷୟରେ ଜାଣିବାକୁ ପାଇଲୁ। ତ ଏହା ଏକ ଭଲ ଜିନିଷ। ଏ ବିଷୟରେ ଜାଣି ମୁଁ ବହୁତ ଖୁସି ହେଲି, ଏବଂ ମୋ ଘରେ ଏବଂ ନିଜ ଲାଇଫ୍ରେ ବହୁତ ପ୍ରକାର ଚେଞ୍ଜେସ୍ ମୁଁ ଫେସ୍ କରିଥିଲି, ଯାହାଫଳରେ କି ଏସବୁ ଘରେ ଖରାପ ବୋଲି କହନ୍ତି। ତ PhD ଜାଣିବା ପରେ ଏବେ ଖରାପ ମୁଁ ଜାଣିବାକୁ ପାଇଲି। ତ ଏତିକି କହୁଛି, ଧନ୍ୟବାଦ।
Yeah, just I don't need to say much, but yes, just hearing it directly from this person who is the one who we're trying to help just goes a long way in communicating and showing real impact, which goes much beyond the statistic, even though the statistic is helpful and good. I request you to just go to the next slide, please. So apart from on-ground programs, as I mentioned, we also work through capacity building programs with trainers, physical educators. So M&E is ingrained in that aspect as well. I've just outlined a few steps on the process, but I'll just summarize it. So before any workshop, we conduct a needs assessment to understand where are the training gaps, what are the needs of the participant group that we're looking at. During the workshop, our facilitators play an active role in recording their observations, gathering quotes, understanding the areas of feedback. After the evaluation, we usually share a survey form, which is through a Google form, and it's usually translated in a local language, where the participants are able to share their own feedback, and in terms of just telling us how they felt and areas that we can improve. And finally, we just create a report just to outline what kind of challenges were faced by the participants, how the training helped them, and what was the impact of the program. Can we go to the next slide, please? So similarly, if you look at the report, there are quantitative numbers to each area of our impact in terms of providing training workshops. But numbers go a certain way, but after adding a certain storytelling element, quotes, narratives from participants, we are actually able to showcase how they've been able to be impacted from our training programs. Just to provide some insight into that, there's another video here. Request you to kindly play it. So this is actually a participant sharing their own feedback and experience, which just goes beyond numbers.
का जो हम ट्रेनिंग अटेंड कर रहे हैं प्रो स्पोर्ट डेवलपमेंट का, स्पोर्ट्स फॉर डेवलपमेंट मेथोडोलॉजी को लेके, मेरा एक्सपीरियंस ऐसा है कि पहली बार इंडिया में ऐसा कोई सर्टिफिकेशन कोर्स हो रहा है कि जहाँ पे स्पोर्ट्स फॉर डेवलपमेंट में कोई सर्टिफिकेशन कोर्स प्रोवाइड कर रहा है। ऐसे कई NGOs या ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है इंडिया में जो सेशन लेते हैं, बच्चों के साथ कम्युनिटी में काम करते हैं, लेकिन कई तरीके से
I think since the screen size a bit small, we can pause it. It was just more of an example of how a participant just goes beyond, it just goes beyond reporting and giving numbers. A participant sharing their actual experience just provides a clearer picture into the true impact of a training program. We can just head to the next slide, please. And finally, in terms of our work with organizations, as I mentioned, we are involved in research engagements for third-party organizations across the globe. One such engagement was partnering with UNESCO New Delhi in 2021 to prepare a report called More Than a Game. This report is publicly accessible, and I would request all of you all to just have a look at it. What this report does is providing some trends and information about the sport for development ecosystem in India. But what we've integrated as part of this report is case studies on a few organizations, which just goes beyond providing the larger image of a macro level status of the sport for development sector, but also personal contribution, personal challenges, setbacks, and how each organization was able to start their operations and the number of hurdles they face. I think case studies go a long way in just outlining personal narratives, personal journeys, which goes and helps others reading them to just pick and learn from wherever they can. And yeah, I would recommend everyone in this, I hope the presentation is shared, you can have a look at this report. The link's right there. And finally, just to summarize my sharings, I can just go to the next slide. So final reflections, why is storytelling important? As I was mentioning throughout my presentation, so it's not always about the numbers. The numbers are good. They allow us to communicate our impact and demonstrate the positive impact of our work. But we believe that adding storytelling elements and narratives truly gives the insight behind those numbers and really shows what impact has been made. The degree of change, what we mean here, number shows us part of the picture. For some, the change is significant. For some, change is less. In the end, if you're just providing a number, you're not really outlining how exactly the change is happening. So maybe including elements of storytelling will actually convey to stakeholders how great of a magnitude the change really was. Giving people a voice, so to prevent M&E from being too rigid, it's really recommended that you give that open platform, open space to your participants, to stakeholders involved in your program, so that they can share their narratives, they share their experience. And ideally, this is done in the local language, for example, as it was done in our video. Another aspect of the video that we shared was that video was created by our own on-ground staff member. And the translation was done through an app. The video was captured through a mobile phone. So we don't really need high-tech equipment or investment in consultants to translate material. Everything's out there. It just needs some motivation to do it. Capturing complexity. What I meant is, okay, we reach a certain goal, but what are the challenges we faced towards reaching the goal? Sometimes we are not able to capture it if we restrict ourselves to just numbers. Maybe getting personal stories and narratives just gives a clearer picture out there. And I would like to end my presentation with just talking about how we can humanize data. Storytelling provides the perfect platform to bringing numbers to life, bringing impact to life, and creating that personal connection with anybody who's reading these stories that you're trying to put out there. Thank you once again to Tafisa for providing this platform, and I hope the learnings were able to help those attending today's session.
Thank you very much, Rohan. Yeah, I see a lot of similarities even between pro sport development and URA, where you find when you do these kind of monitoring and evaluation, you find things that you might not have expected. And then it's just even more that you can advertise and promote about why sport for development, sport for social change, sport for education is also so important. So thank you very much for that. And yes, and I've seen some comments about asking about the presentations, and we will be sharing everything in a post summary after the webinar. So moving forward into our panel discussion. So we're very excited to have a great panel on this monitoring and evaluation sector. So we've selected panelists that represent different areas of the sport for all field. We have organized the panel around the roles of policymakers, so groups that take in information and translate information, findings, and recommendations into policies or even legislature. Funders, so those who are providing one-time or ongoing funding for events, programs, and initiatives. Implementers, those who are on the ground implementing and reporting on programs. And shared measurement, a strong research basis for measuring and monitoring and evaluation in a way that allows for comparison and analysis at larger scales. As a reminder to those watching, please enter any questions into the Q&A function of the webinar, which is in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. We hope that we'll be able to get to your questions, and we'd like to welcome our panelists and get any previous speakers to answer directly any questions in the Q&A. So I'm going to first introduce our panelists, and the first thing I'd like them to do is a quick story about one of your favorite impacts from a program or initiative that you've been involved with, took part in your home country, or just have always remembered that you are most proud of. So it's kind of a way about how, and then also a question about how M&E plays in your work. So I'm going to start off with Habre Jesu Micter. He is Director of Physical Education and Sport at the Ministry of Sport and Community Development in Trinidad and Tobago. So first thing, you have a quick story about one of your favorite impacts from a program or initiative that you've been a part of?
Hi, good morning. Well, good morning from Trinidad and Tobago to everyone. I think it's good afternoon in Europe. However, just want to say thank you very much for TAFISA for having this platform for people from all over the world to be able to engage and learn. And thank you very much for that question, Rachel. So yeah, there are quite a number of favorites as it relates to work that we have done at the Ministry of Sport and Community Development, where I work as the Director of Sport. One of those would be a self-defense workshop that we host every year now as part of our Pink Rain campaign. The Pink Rain campaign is a program that is specifically targeting the development of sport and advocacy for women in sport. And that self-defense program, we have it at various communities throughout Trinidad. Of course, Trinidad and Tobago are two islands, a twin island state. And coming out of the self-defense would have been quite a number of stories where women who would have had particular fears about how to manage situations when it is, they may be confronted, the level of confidence that they develop, being able to now understand how to use their bodies as a defense mechanism, understanding the tools that are required to engage in any sort of conflict that might arise. And I mean, we have to admit in Trinidad and Tobago, we do have a bit of a crime problem. So it gives persons, and men do join as well too, and we don't, disallow them. But at the end of the day, it targets women, and it gives women that level of confidence to protect themselves, to protect their families, and to feel a lot more secure in their space and in their environment. So there are a number of actual conversations that I've held with a number of women coming out of this, and it's always very heartening to hear how they feel about the program, right? So that's probably one of the favorite ones that I have.
Yeah, coming from it. Yeah, it makes sense. And then how would you say that monitoring and evaluation helps to inform policy at your ministerial level? So what kind of information are you looking at? How do you transform it? What's going on there?
Right. So at our level, I mean, of course, being a government agency, you are always in a bit of a scrap for funding, right? As I think it would have been Kwok who mentioned earlier, that sport tends to be one of those areas where there's a lot of discussion about the importance of sport and how sport influences society. But when it comes to funding, it might not be matching what the rhetoric might be. So what we try to do is to utilize the monitoring and evaluation that we do in terms of numbers, yes, because usually from a politician's point of view, numbers tend to be one of the key things that they look for. But we also look at it from telling stories. What we have done over the last 2 to 3 years is, especially with the emergence of more of a focus on virtual platforms and so, because of COVID and coming out of the COVID situation, is that we have been doing a lot more publicizing of videos. Taking videos first and foremost, or making videos of what it is we do, of the discussions that can be held surrounding the particular areas of focus, and getting from the participants themselves and the facilitators understandings as to how it is what we are doing is making that level of impact. So we don't rely just on written reports, because I mean, written reports a lot of the times go on shelves or go on a bookcase or stays in a file. Videos are a lot more accessible, a lot easier to probably listen to a 3 to 5 minute video than read a 20-page report. And we've realized that helps in terms of getting people to understand better what it is we do, and of course, helps in our advocacy for funding, but also for sponsorship. Because even as a ministry, we do reach out to the private sector to see where they can assist or partner with us in what it is we do, because we realize that private sector support for sport and development and sport for development is important to ensure that there's that sustainable flow. And it gets them more involved as well, and it has them or makes them a lot more willing to change their own cultural mindsets and errors that they have made in the past in terms of myths about sport and sport for development.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear how broad it is. It's not just one thing you're looking at. Yeah, okay, we'll come back to you in a moment, Gabre. I mispronounced your name earlier. Apologies after I asked you. Okay, next, and moving to Maria Bobenreith. She is Executive Director at Women Win, a global fund aimed to advance girls' and women's rights in and through sport. So, Maria, what would you say is a quick note about a favorite impact from a program or initiative that you've seen with Women Win?
Thanks very much. I want to first just also thank Tafisa and in particular Khame Matubi for inviting me here. My story, there's a lot of people who should be here in my place in my organization. I'm probably the least qualified person in the entire organization to be talking about this topic. Some of them are on the call, so I will defer questions to them, but there's lots of folks, Marianne Schweikart, Kitty Macklin, Nicole Matuska, Kat Schulter, I see you're here, Mariana Chavez Sanchez, they're all on the call. So just to say that I'm not the expert here. And the person who should be telling the story is also on this call, Kalyani Subramanian. She is the executive director of the Maitriyana Charity Foundation in India. I had the privilege and pleasure of traveling with Kalyani, oh gosh, must be 10 years ago now, to a program that we were working on together in Coimbatore in India. The program was targeted at young female workers who were working in a garment factory and in a residential setting. The owners of the factory really noted there was a lot of mental health issues. This is a lot of the first time away from home for these young women. They're working, 5-6 days a week. They're in the residential setting. There's just challenges that we know from adolescent girls everywhere, young women everywhere. And we were tasked with creating a program with Kalyani and the team to help impart more information for them about their rights as workers, and also just try to bring joy to what is, often for girls in particular, a challenge. So I have very, very, very good memories of the factory owner said, yeah, it's Sunday morning. This is the day off the girls have. You probably won't see a lot. They like to sit back and watch Bollywood movies. So we'll plan on having 20 girls. So myself, Sarah Murray, and Kalyani said, okay, 20 girls is great. Even if we get 10, it'll be fine. And we started playing. Kalyani started her magic, and then we saw 20 girls. Then it was 40. Then it was 60. And we saw them just starting to pour out of the dormitories, trying to figure out what was going on and hearing the absolute joy of just play, like being on your body and running around. And so one of my questions for this entire group of illustrious folks that are on this webinar is, it's been touched on a bit, but I think you cannot underestimate, especially for girls and women, the political implications of joy. Joy is absolutely transformative. And measuring that, I think, in both quantitative and qualitative ways is a really interesting question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, the joy, what a great impact. So as a funding organization that provides funding to different programs and organizations and different initiatives, this is a really broad question, but if you could just say, in a few words, what is the importance that you're looking at with M&E working with organizations?
Well, Women Win is really an intermediary organization, which means that we're a funder, but essentially most of us that are funders are actually working as intermediary between other funders and ensuring that money gets to the organizations that have the lived experience to work at a very local level. I will say we're also a feminist organization. And so everything everybody has said on this panel, we completely support. I think I'm going to try to bring in a bit of a different lens. to be honest, sport is really still highly gendered. It's still very masculine. It's also, in most of our experience, highly colonial. And it is still somewhat elitist in the sense of even to participate in the context of the poorest and the most marginalized kids don't often get access. So from our perspective at Women Win, often what we're looking for, and in the case of girls and young women, is that the participation of girls and women is very different than boys. It's a very political act, even to be in the public space, even to take ownership and show, and to show that the ability to do that. So I have three areas I think that is important to us. Data is power. The way we produce it, the way that we use it, they're political. It's something that we should really think about. Often traditional funder-centered measurement and evaluation doesn't fundamentally challenge power imbalances. And if we're trying to really instill these things in participants, I think often some of the methodologies actually reinforce them. So I think we have the responsibility to ask the question, if what we're doing reinforces power imbalances, reinforces gender stereotypes, and if not, and if so, to think of other ways to doing this. Women Win has always been a big proponent of participatory processes in MEL, and I would probably start with L first. Learning, growing, I think emphasizing the L in MEL is absolutely critical. I was very happy to see in the Menti that it came up as the top reason to do this. As a funder, what you want to see is organizations that are learning and growing and moving, and that aren't necessarily, the world is moving very fast, that aren't stuck in one way of doing things that's been done that way for 10 or 20 years. We always are looking for more feminist, like I said, more decolonial, more democratic transformation processes in MEL. And those approaches are really anchored in learning. They are really local, very local. They're contextualized knowledge. They demonstrate really ways of knowing that share power. They prioritize clarity and voice of the participants. So I think data has to reflect that. And the third thing that I would say is that there's just multiple ways of knowing once you start engaging in more flexible and collaborative MEL practices, I think you will capture participants' diverse experiences. And again, this is not that data capture and log frames aren't important, but you have to have, I think, in particular, if you're working with gender, not just girls, but with the topic of gender, we have to work on decolonizing some of the more extractive MEL practices and gather data that actually drives social systemic change.
Thank you. Yes, very much agreed. So yeah, I'm excited. We'll come back to you later in the discussion. And yes, I think a lot of people attending this webinar are interested in how to present this to their funders, to get these grants through. So thank you, Maria. Okay, moving next to Alan Williams. He is representing our implementer group here. So he is CEO of the Sport for Social Change Africa Network. So Alan, representing the Sport for Social Change Africa Network is a network of grassroots sport for development organizations. So how is monitoring and evaluation dealt with? How does it help these organizations, and mainly what are the challenges encountered and the impacts that you've seen from it? So we just want to see from those on the ground, what have you seen? And actually I realized I just skipped ahead a little bit. And so if you want to tell me also one of your favorite impacts that you've seen maybe from one of your grassroots organizations.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you to Tafisa for this opportunity. A very hard question, just to give you my best. There's so many, but of recent, we have been implementing a project now for the last 3 years in terms of employment through sport, to look at sustainable livelihoods across the African continent. We are an African-based organization based from Pretoria, South Africa, and working in a few African states north of Southern Africa. And so basically we had this project to encourage employment through sport, where we looked at recruiting unemployed young people. The age group in South Africa is between 18 and 35. And we recruited approximately 4,260 unemployed young people, and placed those young people with at our NGOs at a grassroots community level. And believe it or not, and if we're talking inclusion, One of our strategic partners within the network is Special Olympics South Africa, and they deal a lot with people with intellectual disabilities. And I would like to say that we were very intentional by looking at upping those numbers in a recruitment, but that would be a lie. So, but the majority of the young people that were recruited came from Special Olympics, and it was through this project that we were able to, this, you know, marginalized group, ensure that many of those young people have opportunities. And for the first time, it was the first time that they received a stipend. It was the first time that they had an opportunity to open up a bank account. It was the first time that they had an opportunity to feel like breadwinners within their own family, being able to contribute, and that done so much for their self-esteem. And so that was a huge plus for us during you know, the implementation of this project. Yeah, so that stands out.
Yeah, powerful impact. And then what would you say is how is with these grassroots organizations, you know, do you know how the monitoring and evaluation is really dealt with there? Are they at the level where they're maybe, you know, putting out impact reports, or what's the current level there?
Yeah, well, I guess that you know, sometimes monitoring and evaluation is seen as a kind of luxury, yet it's so vitally important. Some organizations don't have the specialization within their organization to have somebody specifically focusing on monitoring and evaluation, or having the necessary tools for that, you know. But yet it's such an important aspect of programming. And in our case, as a network, you know, we've managed to, on an annual basis, you know, try to keep our finger on the pulse to ascertain, you know, what is happening. And you know, Africa is such a huge continent, and how do you, you know, manage what is taking place on the ground? So we've kind of used you know, forms such as Google Docs to capture data, but then sometimes you know, we cannot really validate the information given to us. Sometimes organizations are not responsive to fill in those annual reports, you know. But at the same time, you know, there is some good data that you know, comes through that tells us in terms of where the organizations are implementing, the size of the NGOs, the ratio with regards to staff in terms of male-female ratio, but also in terms of the beneficiaries, in terms of the male-female ratio, and in terms of people with disability, and then also giving us data with regards to the impact and the reach of you know, programming that's taking place, you know. But obviously, you know, with the fast pace and moving of things are constantly changing. So you can't do monitoring and evaluation now or research and expect to use that data with 6 months. There's a lot that has been done, you know.
Yeah.
So I guess from our side right now, where we are with the SSCN is that we currently developed our own app that can give us real-time data on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in terms of measuring what the organizations are doing on the ground. But then also sometimes, you know, as a funded partners with us, we will build in an M&E component of the project, where we then look at outsourcing that component to an expert that will then go and measure, you know, the impact of the program in the field.
Yeah, you already kind of got a little bit into a next question I had, but before we get into that, I want to introduce our fourth panelist. So this, we're happy to invite Ridwan Aziz. He is representing our shared measurement and impact, and he is monitoring, evaluation, and learning manager at Olympism 365 with the IOC. So welcome, Ridwan. And first, I want to ask you the question about what would you say is a favorite impact of a program that you've been involved with? I'm sure you see lots of programs. I'd love to hear one of your favorite.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you, Tafisa. And good afternoon to everyone on this call from Lausanne. Like I was introduced, my name is Ridwan Aziz. I sometimes will struggle to pick the most impactful story that I've come across. But in the spirit of aligning with Alan Williams, in terms of his impact story, I'm going to give you one from a project that I was recently involved with in Nigeria. The name of the project is called the Nigeria Way Project, Youth Empowerment and Women Entrepreneurship in Northern Nigeria. So this is a collaborative project between the Global Affairs Canada and Mennonite Economic Development Associates, MEDA, in Nigeria. So the aim of the project is to support the build the business capacity of women and young people who are involved in the agro-processing of certain agricultural commodities, improve the business environment where they operate their businesses, and of course, strengthen the community support for women and young people-led businesses, thereby trying to reduce the risk of early and forced girl child marriages. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a project that is holistic in terms of empowering the woman, ensuring that she gets all the needed support from the government and from the community to be able to deliver. Now, majority of the project participants, majority of them are small-scale entrepreneurs with a business capital of average of about less than $5, all right? Mm-hmm. Now, so at the beginning of the program, some of the things we did, I don't want to go into details of that, but let me go into talking about the story. So through bespoke capacity development, enhanced community collaboration for women's businesses, handholding support for these women, regular monitoring, evaluation and learning, and of course, adaptive project management. We supported these women to form 509 savings and loan groups, comprising of 25 women in 509 of such groups in Bauchi State, and other community women seeing how this ordinary savings and loan group has now improved financial inclusion for women, empowering women. The women went on to replicate another 460 groups independently from the 509 that the project supported them to develop. So what started as a women in business cooperative society, in fact, they call it Women in Business Forum. That was the name. It became something that metamorphosed into a small-scale microfinance bank with an initial capitalization of $25,000, granting single-digit loan to women and young entrepreneurs in agro value chain in Bauchi State, Nigeria. All right. And now these women, through some of this initiative, the microfinance bank, they have now gone to establish something we call agro mini parks. So these agro mini parks are small scale industries where these women collectively own the industry and they can go in and process their grains for uptake by higher, bigger industries within the region. So for women, for anyone who has any fair idea of what the geopolitical landscape of Nigeria, Bauchi State is one of the most conservative states in Nigeria in terms of women participating in business at all, or even any form of inclusion. So now, something that started as a cooperative society, now they've gone to creating financial inclusion for women, and beyond that, they are contributing to Nigeria's economic growth, and by extension, contributing to food security in Nigeria and in Africa. So I have picked out this project because this project has used agriculture to deliver some of these social outcomes, and it's all around lots of very impactful outcomes, but the principle of all impactful programs are all the same, be it in sports, education and livelihood, equality and inclusion. The concept and the principles surrounding impactful projects are all the same, and it's built around how did you plan it? How did you monitor, evaluate, and use some of the learnings from this project and initiatives to reiterate and replan and improve to deliver impactful social outcomes?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a major theme of a lot of the programs we see. They end up doing a lot more than we ever thought they would, which is another reason that it's just so important to continue on with measuring and using lots of different types of tools in order to do that. So speaking of the tools, so Ridwan, coming from Olympus M365, which one of the main goals is to elevate more shared measurement, what systems do organizations need to put in place to make the leap from more simpler M&E, data collection or not collecting much, to more advanced shared measurement and impact? So things that are, alongside the major themes like you mentioned in your example.
Okay, so I will start by first aligning with some of the earlier presenters around the what we call the thinking or some of these male monsters. When you say monitor and evaluation, people sometimes develop high blood pressure, thinking, oh, monitor and evaluation, that's a lot of mathematics and all. But I would like to reiterate that monitor and evaluation is not isolated from the actual project management itself. Monitor and evaluation is a part and parcel of an effective project management cycle. All right. And this starts from how we plan to deliver programs to how do we implement. And as we implement, how do we monitor some of these programs that we're talking about using sport-based approaches or any of these approaches. Now, as we implement, how do we evaluate over time, ensuring that, okay, for a program that want to use sports to promote livelihoods, over time, you want to be able to see between the first, for a 2-year program, you want to be able to see, so of all the participants, what has changed, beyond talking about we are training 100 participants, what is changing realistically about their lives toward achieving the outcome that we want to see or the impact that we want to be able to deliver over the course of 2 years. So as we implement, we monitor, we generate learnings and insights, and then use all of those to replan and reiterate and improve and optimize the program. So here, I'm going to list out 5 things that I think are critical. The list is not exhaustive. And the first is around stakeholder engagement. And this heavily reflects in how Olympus M365 as a strategy of the IOC, how we invest and collaborate in sport for sustainable development programs with our collaborators. We start by engaging in robust stakeholder engagement. And stakeholder engagement, when we say that, sometimes people think it's talking about stakeholders involves organizations like you who are on this call. No. Stakeholder engagement starts from the actual beneficiaries of the programs or initiatives that we want to deliver in the communities. All right. So we want to deliver this program. What are the changes that are emphasized that these participants or beneficiaries will get from the program, and what is the relative importance of those outcomes to the program participants? Now to organizations who are going to be implementing, to government agencies who will be collaborating with, what does success look like to them? And what does success look like to you, the implementing entity? And for those who are funding some of this program, what does success look like? So having a broad view, an idea of what success looks like for everyone helps you, and take me to the second point, to be able to commonly define common indicators that you are going to use to measure success at the different level, at the participant level, at the practitioner level, at the coaches and teachers, working with these kids, the organizations, the government policies, and of course, every other stakeholders involved. The next level is around integrated data collection. Where things don't get measured, they don't get reported. If you don't know what you want to report on, you will not know how to measure it. You will not know when and how to collect it. So here, integrating monitoring and evaluation plan into actual project management plan ensures some level of effectiveness and efficiency in how we collect some of the program data. You don't necessarily need to commission a special study to collect certain outcome data. Sometimes some of this can be leveraged when certain other program activities are taking place. Give example, a training on personal branding that has 5 modules. We don't necessarily need to wait until the end of the 5th module to collect certain progress indicator on that particular program. On the 3rd module, we could have just as a pre and post training evaluation just to see what people are learning and if some of the intended outcomes are going to be happening as we envisage. And I would also like to reiterate that perhaps based on our own delivery and working model, working in sports for sustainable development, where we always almost have the same common vision of delivering social impact using sport-based approaches. So sometimes it becomes difficult when organizations work in silos, having their own individual mail systems, like Alan William mentioned. Sometimes people have Excel to Google Sheet, they don't update them and all. So this brings me to having a collaborative platform, impact measurement platform, where collaborators can come in, define what their project objectives are, what are some of the indicators that are contributing to, and how are others using this kind of indicators, and how can they operationalize it so that by the time 2, 3, 4, 5 organizations are reporting on this kind of indicator, it becomes common. And then in that manner, we are already having a team, and then we are establishing pattern, and organizations can learn from others who are measuring certain outcomes or indicators in the same way. Lastly, here, I don't like talking too much. Here is that before we can make an effective monitoring and evaluation is the responsibility of everyone in the organization. It's not just for the male officer. We need to have organization-wide capacity building. Everyone needs to understand why monitoring and evaluation is important. Why are we collecting this data? What do we need to use this data for? For whom? When do we need to collect it? And why is it important to have quality and robust data? I'm going to stop there.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Ridwan. Yeah, everyone has really gone into a lot of our initial kind of things we wanted to give to our attendees about how you can start, some practical examples, what people are already doing. So thank you, everyone, for that. And just to already kind of go to a question where we'd like your input on is, we often hear about that we need data for policymakers to pass legislation or to make recommendations, and funders to allocate resources, but program deliverers, the implementers on the ground, or even the grassroots organizations, they lack the capacity, understanding, and knowledge, and maybe resources to provide this data, which has like a negative cycle or snake eating its own tail problem. So how can we add more M&E into current ongoing problems? We're not starting from the beginning where we can design something. How can we add it to current programs so that we're not reinventing the wheel, but rather have a running start? And then I'll run into a part 2 about though keeping the human touch to our programs, because we don't want to just make them data machines. They're meant to help people at the end of the day. So anyone can jump in to kind of talk about what immediately they might see where implementing it into current programs. Don't be shy.
If I may, no, that's not at all. But if I may, I think in cases where you already have programs taking place, what becomes important is really and truly just understanding, one, where you are with that particular program, and if that program is meeting the objectives, whether those were formalized objectives or not, but meeting the objectives that would have been initiated at the start of the program. I think once you kind of get a feel as to where you are, I think it's now starting to formalize thereafter. Basically making sure that one, you have a mission and a vision for what it is you want to do for that program, establishing SMART objectives, having your success indicators aligned to those objectives, and then from there, developing the monitoring and evaluation tools that required to be able to understand better where you're going. Now, the thing is that you'll always have, in an ad hoc way, some either stories or anecdotal data that you can utilize. And I think it's important to not buy away from or go away from some of that information. I think that is still vital information that can be used, but it's a matter of utilizing what you can from what has been done before, but then being able to formalize it to be able to state going forward. This is the way we are progressing.
Yeah.
Understanding better how it is you're able to have a more scientific process.
Perfect. And Alan, I want to right over to you. And I'll just say that we might run a few minutes over. We'd like to have a few more time for discussion, but if anyone has to go, we respect that. But Alan, what would you say to this question?
I think there's nothing new under the sun. Probably just a variation from place to place. So I would, look at a clearinghouse or a national global platform where organizations could access, and there probably is, but there's so much out there in the sector. Everybody's trying to do everything. Everybody wants to be the first in doing everything. And what this causes is maybe a lot more confusion. You've got academics, you've got this, you've got the IOC, you've got FIFA, so we need to have a one common area, a common place that could share, as much information about monitoring and evaluation tools for beginners, for organizations, various thematic areas, and even share some of the data and that comes from there. And I think that would be my take. We need to have a common place.
Yeah, agreed. And Ridwan, anything to say on that? I mean, as part of Olympism 365, you guys are involved in creating one place for things to happen.
Yeah, I'm really going to ride on the last two presenters' point and add one extra one on that. Thank you, Mukhtar, on that. You see, so let organizations start from wherever they are now, start with the quick wins, identify what some of those easy data that you can easily collect now and communicate as the program progresses. I'll give you an example of one of our initiatives with PAT, Sport and Net Cooperation Initiative, happening in 5 countries, just launched this year. At the middle of the year, we already have progress report around the concrete number of participants that are reached and the total number of people reached through some of these campaigns on encouraging people to take up sports to prevent NCDs. Now, talking about siloed approach, sometimes if you want, they say if you want to travel fast, travel alone. If you want to travel far, travel with others. But if you want to succeed, work with those who have become successful and have the resources. So I'm not going to have so much time to break this down, but I hope that the analogy serves. And in my closing thought, I would like to say that working alone can be quite exhausting and resource intensive. So where possible, leverage on existing frameworks that others have developed, others have used. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You need to just pick up from the resource that other people have created and used. For Olympism 365, we sort of use the London benchmark framework, the social value international principles, some of the underlying principles to come up with our own result framework. There are a lot of other resources like the Commonwealth evaluation framework with sport and SDG indicators that organizations in Sport for All can pick and start working from, and then you don't need to start afresh. Really.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll be sharing some of these resources with our in the post event email. Maria, you had a comment on this?
Yeah, and to add on to what everyone else is saying, I think fundamentally our experience and our partners' experience shows that more data doesn't necessarily mean good data or data that funders or policymakers need. So I would say really there's a need to identify with policymakers and work with them to know what data they're needed and what decisions they're trying to make. Our experience being a feminist organization is that often the data has very little to do with sports. It's really data collected around gender issues. The second thing that's already been highlighted, but the importance of building partnerships. So don't start on your own. There's so much out there. And the third piece is build on what's already out there. You've named a couple of things, but I'd like to call out UNESCO's work. They've got a great framework. You've got the Global Observatory for Gender Equality in Sport. And so we need diverse voices and diverse data to actually give us data that helps policymakers make good decisions related to what they're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Thank you. And then one final question for everyone. So everyone has given already a lot of advice on what would be the first step, and we'll be sharing resources. And I think we've even talked about the issues as well when we want to learn from our programs. We're not just collecting perfect data to share about how great we are. We want to hear the negative stuff and listen to it. But so in just 10 seconds for each panelist, what advice would you give to organizations that are just starting their M&E journey? So I'll start with you, Maria. Just 10 seconds.
Focus on learning. I think most funders are making it doesn't matter what sector they're coming from. They're trying to make a good investment. One of the key things we look for are not the perfect stories, because those of us that have been in sport, like I said, no, it's not perfect. So show that you're learning, create context that's appropriate, actively engage partners, and make sure that you have the voice of those that are participating in your programs, and just really engage the participants. That's who funders want to hear from. So make sure the participants' voices are clearly in everything from setting up the way that you do, Mel, through actually the data you're collecting.
Yeah, that's been a major theme from even our case studies, is learning about what your programs are doing. Ridwan, what would you say? 10 seconds.
All right. Probably I've said this before, that you can't do it alone. Leverage on the other people's resources, work with other people, but most importantly, identify very early on, what does success look like to you as an organization? What kind of success do you want to see on every stakeholder who has something to do with your program? And along the way, find a way to be able to articulate, measure, and communicate the impact of your intervention on every stakeholder who have come in contact with your program.
Thank you. Yes, identify success. And Alan, what would you say? One piece of advice in 10 seconds?
I would say be intentional to include monitoring and evaluation component in your programs. Then also seek to learn and understand the value of M&E in your work. Another very important aspect is to be honest and transparent. People need to hear the good and bad of the outcomes. And lastly, we need to be respectful to those that you are gathering the data from in a manner in which you conduct your monitoring and evaluation. That's what I would say is key.
Yeah, agreed. Transparency. It's one of the reasons, we should be doing it. And lastly, Gabriel Jesus, sorry.
Right, 10 seconds. Have a vision and know everything or do everything possible to gather all the information you can to meet that vision.
Gather. That's the bread and butter, is actually gathering the information. So perfect. Okay, so thank you to all of our panelists for your open and honest answers. Audience, please don't leave just yet. Sorry, we just promised there's a few more minutes. We want to engage you on two final questions. So we'd like to, after listening to all of our presentations, we want to know the main challenges and roadblocks that you're facing when attempting to implement more M&E. So we'll quickly go back to the Mentimeter, and I have fixed it so that you can answer for 3 responses. But we want to know this because this is going to help us with the things that we send to you and the and the ways that we as TAFISA want to help. So you can go ahead and already go to the 4th slide. Yeah. And last vote for, you have 3 options for what are the main barriers and challenges that you're finding in the M&E. Knowledge and education, funding, human and organizational capacity, having the actual manpower to do it, support from decision makers, tools and resources, cultural barriers, and the actual having the data available, kind of our last point there. Thank you, everyone. Okay, just go for another about 10 seconds. A panelist, 10 seconds. All right, so it looks like the main ones are the human and organizational capacity. Yeah, and of course, always the funding. That's always an issue in sport and in sport for all. We have to do a lot with a little. And then, yeah, the tools and resources, the next biggest group. Perfect, thank you. So yeah, we're going to be using this information to, you know, help us to help you. So thank you. And then one more question. It's going to be, would you be interested in a specialized more M&E training? So we had a lot that we wanted to cover today that we didn't really, that we would love to have gone more deeper, because we know we already shared a lot of practical things, but there's a lot more. So we're trying to understand how we can help people. So thank you very much. Yeah, good to see that people would be interested in it. So we'll keep you updated. We have your information. Okay, so thank you everyone for the answers. It definitely helps us in the future. So we don't want to leave you empty-handed. We're going to be linking you to some resources about how to get started in this M&E. So this is coming from Olympusm 365, and we'll also be sharing additional resources from the panelists as well as presentations that can help you with your monitoring and evaluation, your impact assessment, your communication about it, and more. And in hand with our M&E, please fill out the survey that's at the end of this meeting, but we're not done yet. We want to have one final announcement that we have our next webinar scheduled for October 16th. So the focus of it is going to be on recruiting and retaining girls in sport, the role of coaches. So again, we're very practical with our webinars, and we have a fantastic program for our 3rd webinar in our series. So thank you everyone for your time and attention. I want to specifically thank our Impulse speaker, Kwok, our case study speakers, Rohan and Eduardo, and all of our panelists for your valuable words. Thank you for our audience for attending today. We're extremely grateful for your time, and I hope that you found today the program useful, resourceful, and relevant. We wish you a great rest of the day and rest of the evening, rest of the day. Thank you.